A very brief overview of Linux. First of all, Linux is not an operating system. It is a central component of an operating system, referred to as the kernel. However, once it is paired with commands, which allow us to operate the system the two are installed on, we can then call the pair a Linux kernel-based operating system. And if the commands come from the GNU project, then we call it GNU Linux. Often, when people say Linux, they mean that other class of operating systems that isn't Windows or Apple, which is wrong, but I think it is perfectly fine to call it that. Just using the word Linux is ambiguous but okayish. People just rely on context to figure it out. When someone says, I have installed Linux on all my computers, they mean the operating system, because you can't install the kernel. You use it to craft a brand new operating system. When someone says, I'm compiling Linux right now, then they mean the kernel. They are probably upgrading their operating system kernel to the latest version. Kernel is shipped as source code. It contains code needed to talk to the computer hardware. Compiling is what you do with it. When someone says GNU Linux, then they are being all classy and proper and are referring to the GNU operating system that had its own kernel swapped out for the Linux kernel. The GNU kernel is named Herd, and it is not as good as the Linux kernel. The GNU operating system is so powerful, however, that it can either use the Herd kernel or the Linux kernel. You don't hear about the GNU operating system very often, because it is usually something that operating system creators build on, and their creations usually end up with their own names. The GNU operating system is often used as a base operating system that has more stuff piled on top of it, and only then does it get a name. I am currently writing this on a Fedora Linux. According to Wikipedia, the original programmer that created the Linux kernel, Linus Torvalds, also uses Fedora. And there are many others: Ubuntu, Linux Mint, SUSE, Arch Linux, and so on. They are all Linux, and most of them use the GNU operating system components. GNU is free and pretty good quality. And yes, there are Linux operating systems that are Linux, but not GNU. Android is one of them, and then TV and closed hardware things may get rid of GNU on legal basis, as they don't approve of their license. Allow me to mention a couple of side notes here before we carry on. All my computer programs are under the GNU license. I probably wrote almost 1,000 programs by now. It is not a big number, and most of it has been lost to broken drives, dying laptops, cheap floppies. It was all written for the purpose of self-education. I have about 200 programs on the internet right now, and they are all GNU licensed. I also wanted to explain what compilation is. It is what you do to convert human-readable source code in a programming language designed for programmers to codes that are executable by the CPU, by the computer hardware. Computer hardware talks in an optimized language that is very hard to read by humans. So programmers invented high-level programming languages that are somewhat English-ish to help themselves read their own code better. The machine language is so hard to read that when crackers try to remove copy protection from programs that require purchase and registration, They wouldn't dream of trying to understand all the machine code. They just try to find the first good place to short-circuit the serial number check and get the heck out of there. It is cruel and unusual to read the machine code. Some coders do it when the source code is lost and only quick fixes are needed. And artists write programs in machine code from scratch, but they don't write very big programs, just very artistic machine code. And in the past, programmers used to look down on people that used high-level, more readable programming languages, as they would often overlook something that the human mind could strategize about and optimize really well. But computers get faster, and only high-speed Wall Street traders and graphic card manufacturers worry about writing machine code by hand now. Personally, I go even higher than that. I write in a language that does not ask me to specify the type of memory I need, which, as you can imagine, many programmers consider very wasteful. It is absolutely the same argument that was had back when programmers wrote machine code. Strangely enough, Microsoft added a kind of memory type information back to a variant of my language, which defeats the purpose of an untyped language. They created a language upgrade by moving backwards. Microsoft and Apple are another part of the reason why Linux kernel-based operating systems are important. Because Apple and Microsoft tightly control their software and consider their operating system source code a secret. Since nobody has a copy of the closed operating system source code, when a closed operating system decides that you need an account with them just to turn your computer on, you will have to listen. You will have no choice. You will have to follow what they say. It doesn't matter if this is something that you want or not. And you know what? This type of thing enlarges your attack surface. Someone will either guess your password or the account will get banned for some automatic reason and you will lose access to your files, your whole account. This should never be an issue. No one should track you or tell you how to turn on your computer. You shouldn't be considered a product that represents money. Businesses that want to make less money do not exist. Therefore, profit optimization and maximization will always end up pressuring you into things that you don't want to do. You should try to stay away from businesses that are trying to pinch your pennies to make money from you. They do not want to give you anything of value. Businesses just try to take the maximum that they can get away with. Most of the Linux kernel-based operating systems are open and wouldn't dare to insult you. And if something goes wrong and some project starts eroding due to short-sightedness and greed, the community makes a copy and the development of that project continues elsewhere. And businesses try to take over open projects. Right now, the program I use for recording this text is under fire or on fire. I saw apologies and scolding comments and lost trust and what appears to be heavy moderation. See http://github.com/audacity/1353. Here, when that first heartbreak occurs, when trust is lost, people ask things like, "What stops you guys from taking another U-turn in the future?" Which is quite a powerful question. And then later, forks that create a different developer community happen. Related application ideas pop up here and there, maybe even spawn new projects. And lessons are learned. In summary, Linux is the stuff that talks to hardware. GNU is an operating system that has a kernel named herd that still needs some love and improvement. But the GNU operating system is so flexible that people replaced its herd kernel with Linux kernel, which is further along than herd. Combining the GNU operating system and the Linux kernel, you get the GNU Linux. But that is still pretty bare bones, and here people add even more stuff, which is what Ubuntu, Linux Mint, SUSE, and Arch Linux is. Where nobody is allowed to make a copy of Apple or Microsoft operating systems, as that would result in jail time, the Linux family of operating systems is different. They believe that if you make your own copy, a lot of the code you write will benefit them too. So it is all open and open source. And here, finally, if you are wondering how to get an open Linux-based operating system going, I recommend a Raspberry Pi-based computer. The $150 8GB Raspberry Pi 4 Complete Starter Kit from KanaKit needs a tiny bit of assembly, but there are videos showing you how to do it. And there is also the 4GB, which is okay, $100 fully assembled Raspberry Pi 400 computer kit that looks like a keyboard and is pretty much fully assembled. Other than that, just search the internet for Linux laptop. I have a cheap Walmart laptop that I installed Fedora on, and everything works perfectly fine. I think the most outrageous Linux computer is the Librem phone, priced at $2,000. The opposite is the Pine phone, at just about $150. Finally, the Pines, and Librem phone, combined with the high-end machines over at System76.com, pretty much create a full range of products worthy of a powerful Apple competitor. I am not getting paid for this, I'm not sponsored, I'm just mentioning companies that provide you with Linux. If this text convinces somebody to get a nice Linux, there is a product that I do not recommend, but I must mention because it's such a crazy good idea. And that is the Linux cheat sheet mousepad. They are all insanely overpriced, and free Linux cheat sheets are all over the internet. But there is something crazy honest about those mousepads, as they just capture the most important commands and ideas. It is just something I wish I had when I started learning Linux. I would memorize the heck out of that thing in the lickety-split.